The Dominion Fox News case that was supposed to get underway today has been delayed. According to several reports, Fox News is pushing for an out-of-court settlement. Dominion Voting Systems is seeking $1.6 billion from the media giant after it aired false allegations about the company following the 2020 election.
Dominion says its business has suffered irreparable damages after several of the network's hosts and on-air guests promoted falsehoods that the company flipped votes that were supposed to be in favor of Donald Trump to Joe Biden, therefore helping Biden win. Moreover, on Friday, Fox News actually apologized to the judge overseeing the trial for not defining former chairman Rupert Murdoch's role at the network precisely. Fox News' legal team submitted the apology letter after the judge expressed frustration and sanctioned Fox for withholding that information, like Rupert's role, from the court. Now, in a statement regarding the lawsuit, Fox News says, quote, Dominion's lawsuit is a political crusade in search of a financial windfall, but the real cost would be cherished First Amendment rights. While Dominion has pushed irrelevant and misleading information to generate headlines, Fox News remains steadfast in protecting the rights of a free press. Given a victory for Dominion and its private equity owners would have grave consequences for the entire journalism profession. So this is interesting that the trial expected to get underway is not starting yet. Last week was a pretty bad week for Fox News, given that the judge was very upset with them regarding a mischaracterization of Rupert Murdoch's role. So I don't know. The company might feel like it was going into this week not with their best foot forward. So that might be additional reason or push for them to find a way to settle this case. Obviously, Dominion has to be interested in settling the case, so the sum has to be large enough. It has seemed like Dominion is really out for blood here, which they've presented a strong case so far. It's easy to
understand why. I mean, to look back for months and potentially years, there was a really dominant message that was promoted on networks like Fox News that this voting machine company was, quote, this is what Rudy Giuliani said, quote, formed in order to fix elections by associates of the Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez.
Right.
That there were, remember the narrative about suitcases full of ballots, and this was the kind of rhetoric that not only was happening on Fox News, but that behind the scenes, we now know because of this lawsuit, people who worked at Fox didn't actually believe, but felt like they needed to promote for ratings reasons or to not get on the bad side of Donald Trump.
Well, here's
in internal emails, Murdoch called the election rigging claims really crazy and damaging, not supportive of them, knowing that it wasn't true. But the argument is that he didn't stop to intervene and stop the network from pushing them. Tucker Carlson texted a producer at the time that, quote, there wasn't enough fraud to change the outcome, and that the guest who testified to the contrary, Powell, was, quote, lying, and on and on and on.
But I think you could make the case that all of that is evidence that Fox News did not endorse the conspiracy theory about the election, which, to be clear, again, to satisfy any policies any social media companies have where this video is appearing, Donald Trump did not win the election. Joe Biden was the legitimate winner. It was not stolen, et cetera. Fox brought on guests who said outrageously incorrect things about the election, including Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and others. A fundamental question I see is isn't there a difference between interviewing someone who makes claims that are wrong and you, the host, the employee of the company, of the platform, of the organization, are you the ones making that claim? And I worry about this from a First Amendment standpoint, from a journalism standpoint. I mean, I worry about it for us. I wouldn't want to, be on the hook or be liable for something. I wouldn't want to be in a case where we could be liable. So we have to we have to think very carefully about which guests we could even have on, because if they say something crazy and we don't immediately make that disclaimer or something like, by the way, we don't endorse that, then suddenly we can be sued for $1 billion. Yeah, so that's very concerning to me.
Defamation cases are, against media companies are very difficult to win for this reason. Yeah. What Dominion is arguing is that Fox knew that the guests were what they were going to say before they had them on, that they had. They knew what the sources of their various claims were. They knew that they were inaccurate, and there was a choice to bring them on anyway. And I think that the inside, outside, behind the scenes, public facing gap that we're seeing from these internal emails and text messages and such of Fox hosts where they know that the information is false. I mean, it seems to me to be indicative of two things. One, a choice to continue to launder, this is an argument, to launder what they know is a publicly popular but wrong position without having to personally take it by using guests as a middleman. And two, there's this question of whether or not it undermines the audience's faith in the news organization if they are so willing to kind of carry water for opinions that they privately believe are not in fact true. And some people have pointed to the fact that just today, I believe, Fox News took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, of all places, touting the fact that it is a much more trusted news outlet than NBC, CNN, CBS, MSNBC, et cetera, with 41% of Americans trusting it compared to sub-20 numbers for the rest of those stations. And, is there some inconsistency there? Does Fox News earn that trust when we now know from this lawsuit, regardless of the outcome of the lawsuit, but we now know from the document discovery in the lawsuit how much willingness there is to endorse a narrative, to run cover for a narrative, to allow a narrative that is so contrary to what the hosts themselves believe?
Well, whether viewers do or should trust this network or any other is not the question of the lawsuit, right? And I think there's a difference between thinking information is inaccurate and thinking it's defamatory. I mean, we have guests on this show. I mean, I'm a libertarian, you're a leftist. You probably think some of the guests from my side are saying things that are inaccurate. I probably think some of the guests from your perspective are inaccurate. I don't think it's defamatory, but I do think it's inaccurate. I mean, it's my opinion. I don't know. I could be wrong. And that's, I think, maybe those hosts thought they were bringing on people who are saying things inaccurate, and that's different. That's a different thing than thinking that it's defamatory.
Let's drill down on that a little bit, because I think there is a realm where you can be plausibly wrong. Where you could think, well, elections are a big deal, hypothetically. Let's make sure that any evidence of tampering, let's say there's anecdotal evidence that ballots weren't counted, that there was some foul play, and you have a guest that comes on that says, we need to investigate that. And maybe they're wrong. Maybe there wasn't actually evidence of foul play, but I would argue that that's not defamatory. Do you see a difference between something like that and someone coming on and saying, Russian spies, aliens from outer space, Venezuelans, whoever it is, have created this organization in the United States for the principal reason of rigging our elections, and therefore this company isn't to be trusted? I mean, is there a point at which you're making affirmative claims that have absolutely no basis in reality, that it does slip into something that goes from mistake to defamation?
Well, I mean, there are versions of those things that the mainstream media said about Russian involvement on social media companies that ended up being totally false. Is it defamatory? It's just false. Now, you can always sue.
Maybe.
Again, you can always sue. Like, Dominion is also suing Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. And I think that has total those are the people who said the things. I think that's different than suing the venue in which they were said.
Well, let's look at that. So, say hypothetically.
Again, this is what's being decided. But I'm trying to argue from the threat to journalism and freedom of expression.
I'm with you.
Standpoint.
I think it's an interesting question. I'm just trying to work through it.
Yeah.
Take the government example.
And by the way, I said the same thing, when there were lawsuits relating to Kyle Rittenhouse and the Covington Catholic kid. I said, sure, sue that Native American man who said that, who went on TV and said he gave me that awful stare and he wouldn't let me pass. That was false. Sue him. You're going to sue the TV channel he said that on? I didn't agree with that at the time.
If there were texts that show that Don Lemon, I'm just picking a name out of my hat, if that Don Lemon secretly was like, I know that Kyle Rittenhouse didn't actually shoot black people. That was one of the misinformations that was going around. Or that some other factual reality, not subjective reality of who was at fault, but some factual reality of the case wasn't what they were representing on the TV. Like, I know this is wrong, but I'm going to get some Antifa, Black Lives Matter person on to say he's out here shooting black people. I would argue that there is a good case for defamation, most certainly against Kyle Rittenhouse and potentially against the network if they had knowledge that those were the kind of editorial choices that were being made. But I think this government example that you raised is an interesting one. It's very difficult to sue the government for a whole host of reasons. But imagine there was a world where, in terms of just culpability and accountability, you could say that the government was wrong to be putting out press releases and messaging that Facebook and the like were doing Russian disinformation, planting stories after Bernie wins Nevada that Putin is helping him boost his chances in the election. That seems deeply defamatory, and it's hard for me not to see it as valuable for folks who make knowingly wrong, knowingly incorrect statements to advance some kind of political objective or other kind of financial objective shouldn't have some sort of pushback. I don't. Maybe defamation law isn't the right way to do it, and I'm open. I'm really sensitive to your concern. I think they're right about the potential chilling effect that it has on media companies. But what is so, I think, notable about this Dominion case and notable about the Twitter files is these moments where they internally are having a conversation where they're like, this doesn't actually violate our policy, but let's take Trump down anyway. Mm-hmm. Oh, we know behind the scenes that Dominion voting machines isn't actually rigging the election, that there's no evidence that any fraud was enough to actually change election results, but we're going to have guests on to say that anyway. That to me does seem like a line that is crossed. Mm.
Well, we're going to find out if this trial gets underway or perhaps a settlement will be reached. Good conversation, good debate. More Rising right after this.